This video, I don't know how long it's going to be. I know I didn't want it to be as long as the first one, which, wow, thank you to Mutahar for showcasing a part of my first video in his response to Jirard's response. So, huge thank you for that. I'm going to do my best to keep this one much shorter. And I had even prepared some bullet points and an outline to follow. I was aiming for 20 minutes tops. And then while really wanting to do really good due diligence, I found more things I wanted to point out. So this will be the last time I do anything on this topic, because this is not what I want this channel to be. This channel going forward will be more about educational topics that anybody and everybody should know about their personal taxes, even some business taxes, general accounting things. That being said, let's get started. So, the first topic, I wanted to revisit the claim that Jirard did not know the money wasn't being used, donated, distributed, whatever term, until 2022. That doesn't hold water for me. And I'd mentioned it in the last video because they had to have meetings. The board had to have meetings. And so I found here on CaliforniaNonprofitLaw.com a blog, because I mean every state is different for things like these, but they're based out of California. We're going to look at a California law website. So part of it is, it's called the minutes at meetings, or minutes of the meeting, or something. And it's not really keeping a log of minute by minute who says what. It's not an actual transcript. That's insane. That's not what it is. Minutes of the meeting are just a summary of, and kind of bullet point format of, who said what, who voted on what, who was there, what was discussed. It's just a very general summary of what happened in the board meetings. Something to point out: without meeting minutes, a nonprofit organization does not have proof about decisions made in the boardroom. Lack of meeting minutes would allow the IRS to question the organization's compliance in following the organization's bylaws, which we don't have the bylaws for their organization, but as well as board participation among following nonprofit law and compliance under Internal Revenue Code Section 501. So either they weren't having these meetings, which is an issue in and of itself, or they were having the meetings and they just didn't talk about the money or the finances, which is its own issue, or they had the meetings, they talked about the finances, and they knew the money was just sitting there. It's got to be one of those. So the whole, I didn't know it wasn't being used in 22, but then he still went on to Indyland 23 talking about, yes, we are using the money. And then he didn't really donate it until after Karl and some ordinary gamers videos came out. It just, none of that makes sense. It's too many contradictions. Okay, so the next thing I want to talk about, there was a lot of confusion with the private to public transition, or the fact that they are still filing in 2022, which is after the 60-month period they talked about. They were still filing the 990 PF, which is for private foundations, not the 990 for public charity. The fact that that transition of different form filings didn't happen could be a clerical error, but there's still issues with the 990 PF that was filed, and I will get into those in just a second. And they are, I did look up, one of the links that Jirard provided was a link to the IRS's website where you can search the database for any and all private foundations, public charities, any tax exempt entity. So I did that. I went to the link, searched them. Sure enough, they are a public charity. They should have been filing if the 60-month period, if they were approved at the end of that, because all he really provided was the receipt of notice. He didn't provide when the actual approval or denial took place. But because they are showing as a public charity, it's safe to assume that they were approved at the end of the 60 months at the end of 2020. So 2021 and 22, at the very least, should have been a 990 public charity return, not private foundation, not the 990 PF. So let's take a look at those returns again, because there's some other problems I found in there, mainly dealing to the bigger issue. The biggest issue I had was the potential underreporting of revenue. So this is their 2022 return. Okay, so it is still a 990 PF, even though they are listed as a public charity. It should be a 990. Okay. Oh, and just to throw it in, there were some questions in my comment section asking about the 5% minimum distribution requirement, and there's a lot that goes into determining whether or not a private foundation, which they're not, but even if they were, or well, for the prior years before they became before they terminated the private foundation status, there were questions about if there should have been a minimum 5% distribution to charitable organizations. There's a pretty in-depth process to determine if that foundation, if that private foundation qualifies or would be required to do that. And based on what I'm seeing, no, I'm not going to get into why. Just take my word on it. No, they don't have to. So, going back now to 2022, where are my problems? Or my problems, at least, with this number right here. Okay. So, in my first video, which was also featured on Mutah's video, the math didn't math. I'm going to show you why the math didn't math. They're showing 117,247 contributions, gifts, grants, etc. The money they took in. You may be reading through all of these different things. They didn't rent anything. They didn't have any interest, dividends, anything of the sorts. They didn't buy and sell any stocks or bonds, which would be capital gains. But some of you may be looking at line 10, gross sales less returns and allowances. Less gross returns and allowances just means if you include the refunds you give people on sales of merchandise. So I'm wondering why there's not a number here. In all of the videos that or in Jirard's response video, he talked about all the money they brought in and how the ticket sales, the merchandise sales, the bits, and all the other things helped offset production costs, which I've got a whole issue on that by itself as well. We'll get to it. But that should be reported here. This should be not this simple. The only reason there would be just a single number on this whole thing is if you just said, we're always taking donations, people just give us donations around, and they just write checks all year long. Then this would be the sole item on part one. Okay, so here's where, if they were still a private foundation and they were even doing the wrong form correctly, there would be stuff here. Now, I apologize. This PDF editor that I use, because it's free, kind of chopped the pages not quite how they're supposed to be. Uh, but I had to do that so I can, as you probably saw, I had to go through and redact some information as it scrolled through. So here's where the breakdown, if they were still private and they were at least doing the wrong form correctly, this is program service revenue. You can kind of make out well enough. What is program service revenue? Well, here we have the instructions for Form 990 PF. So, program service revenue on lines 1A through G, which was what we just saw, list each revenue producing program service activity of the organization. What is a revenue producing program service? If you look up examples of program service revenue, you will find if you have a pet adoption shelter and you are charging adoption fees for people to come and adopt a pet, nobody's profiting from that service, but it is a revenue producing program service of that organization. So, what could there have been that sold tickets or admissions, Indyland, and a golf tournament? The numbers for both of those events, the gross amount, which is, like I said before, not a net amount, which is not the money you took in minus the expenses equals what's left. It's all the money that you took in. So, there should be, even if the wrong form was done correctly, program service revenue, line A, Indyland 2022. And then you can't see all the rest of it, but the business code, the amount, and this form is just a way to verify how much of the revenue brought in was actually related to your charitable foundation, how much of it, if any, was unrelated business income that would need to incur income tax. So there should have been line A or B, doesn't matter the order, but there should have been listed right here Indyland 22 and the PBD Convenience Cup 22. With all of the revenues, the gross money, the total money they all took in should have been right here. They don't have members, they don't have dues, they don't have interest on savings, they don't have any of these other things. So then you would have other revenue, you would have a breakdown, and specifically the program service revenue, an actual breakdown. Also, something else to point out here is that according to the instructions, all of the amounts in Part 15A on line 1A through G corresponds to the amounts in Part 1, Column A, line 11 in this case. So whatever the total of everything in the breakdown, the individual breakdown, the total of all that goes on line 11, which would be here other income. So you would ideally supposed to have, again, this is the wrong form if it had been done correctly, you would have contributions, gifts, yada yada. That would be the Tiltify donations exclusively. Then you would have in line 10 all of the merchandising sales. Then line 11 you would have the total revenue in ticket, admissions, or whatever you want to call the cost to be in the golf tournament. You can call that ticket, admissions, or just admissions. You would have the total of admission revenue from Indyland and the golf tournament in line 11. Then you would have an explanation right here. Relationship of activities to the accomplishment of exempt purposes. You put Indyland, it's a very brief 2 to 3 sentence of what that, and then the golf course, the golf tournament, like there would be explanations. I don't understand why there's just a blank. It's just blank. And then something else that's weird. I don't know why there's a negative amount in the expenses. And I know you might be thinking, well, negative expenses reduce income. Yes, but Look at the other four. They're normal because that's just how it's presented in accounting. That's just how that's how you present it. So I don't know what I don't know. I'm not saying there's something nefarious about it. I'm just saying it stood out to me. That's all I'm saying. Now, something else that's here, we have the golf fundraiser expense. So we assume that the foundation paid for all of the expenses, or at least the $5,236 worth of expenses towards the golf tournament. This other amount, 4,700 fundraising. You may assume that that was the cost for Indyland. I I don't. And in fact, Jirard has said they didn't pay for Indyland. Well, but wait. He said that they paid for Indyland in his response video. But he has previously said that TOVG covered the costs.
But it was very expensive, and TOVG covered the cost of it. We're gonna have it probably next year. No promises, but So for those guys who don't know, we had a show last year, and it went great, but it was very expensive, and TOVG covered the cost of it, but
This is from Indyland 2023. So when he says last year there was the event that TOVG covered the cost of Indyland 22. Unless he's talking about something else, I know he's not. He knows he's not. You all know he's not. What is TOVG? TOVG is his parent company of The Completionist, a completely separate legal entity from the Open Hands Foundation. And that's perfectly fine to take your money from one chair, from your for-profit business, and use money there to pay for, that's perfectly fine. TOVG is the company, the parent company, you can say, of The Completionist, official Twitter of that one video gamer community and everything completionist, super beards, and yada, yada, yada. So this is most likely what I would have to assume from this, because I'm tired of digging through stuff. I think it's a safe assumption that that one video gamer is the parent company, or the company that owns the YouTube channel, The Completionist, owns the podcast Super Beard Bros, and all of that stuff. And that's completely fine. If you're going to use the money from those for-profit companies to pay for a fundraiser for a nonprofit, I got no issues with that. My issue is when you come out in your response video after you're caught with some funny business trying to justify the potentially underreported revenue by saying, well, we had all of these expenses. But you shouldn't have the expenses. This expense, if this is for Indyland 2022, it should not be there unless TOVG actually didn't cover the cost. But then why would you say that? There's just it's too many back and forths. It's too many discrepancies. None of this is adding up. And then this isn't even the right form. So you might be thinking, well, what does the right form do? And then just to show, so Jamie Lee Curtis's foundation, which we will be revisiting in a little while, because this is for 2022 when they gave the Open Hand Foundation $25,000, but we'll come back to that in a second. Look, here's their breakdown. They have it. So you may be thinking, well, does everybody have to fill out that? So many pages in the instructions. Who has to fill it out? Maybe they don't have to. Well, which part of Form 990-PF? Foundations which must complete this part. Where's my Zoom? Part 15A, analysis of income producing activities. Everyone. So let's look at a 990, which is what they should be filing if they are a public charity, which they are. There's still itemized details. It looks a bit different, but look what's right here. Separate from contributions and grants. So ideally, in this box right here, you would have from what company? Tiltify. This line would have all of the Tiltify donations, as well as the 25K from Jamie Lee Curtis's foundation. Program service revenue, it doesn't say net of expenses. It says program service revenue. This should be the total of ticket sales for Indieland and the golf tournament. And then we see here other revenue, part 8, column A, so a whole other part. Let's go look at that part. That's going to be where the merchandise sales go. Part 8, statement of revenue, look down here. Gross sales of inventory less returns and allowance. That's all the money, the sales receipts that you get for all the merchandise you sold. Less cost of goods sold. So this would be what it cost you being the foundation. This is what it cost Open Hands to purchase or produce material. If it was selling the completionist merchandise, that's fine. The foundation would have purchased the merchandise from TOVG. So this is where those numbers would show up. It's not just supposed to be one number. Mutahar already calculated where the discrepancies are in the potential underreporting of revenue. So here we have state program service accomplishments, part 3 of the 990. Line 4 of part 3 right here, describe the organization's program service accomplishments for its 3 largest program services as measured, blah, 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 blah. So what you would have here listed by total, let's see, as measured by expenses. So the greatest expense. I don't know which one costs more. If you want to go by the 990 PF that they did file, the golf tournament cost more. I don't know that it actually would have. Who knows? Somebody knows. So you would have the total expenses. Let's just go with that. Let's just go with how the filing actually is. So you would have expenses of the 5,000, whatever it was. If you received any grants, it would be here, and then the revenues, the total revenues, which is all the, you're not counting expenses. The expenses are already over here. So you're going to be able to calculate what the gain or the profit, again, I know it's a non-profit, but I'm just saying profit for common terminology. And then you would have Indieland here. And then if there were other activities, you would have them here, and then like multiple of this page, if others. But they would be separate items. You don't just put them all as one big number, which that number's off anyway. All ticket proceeds go directly to the Open Hand Foundation. So there should have been something on those product service revenue. That is a service of being allowed into an event. Okay, just like or just ticket sales to anything. Like it's that's where it belongs. If they underreported revenue, is there a way to check what it should have been? Well, Muta did it. I'll do it again. So if we look at what was reported, we have 117,247. All right, so let's do the math. 25,000 from Jamie Lee Curtis's foundation to Open Hand. Here's the Tiltify numbers for Indieland. And we're just going to leave it at this. We're not even going to, I'm going to completely ignore any theoretical ticket sales, merchandising sales, any of that, okay? And then include the 5% maximum fee. And then also, it's important to know, because some people are going to say, well, maybe Jamie Lee Curtis's 25,000 is part of this 81,000. But if you scroll down a little bit, the top donor was G Fuel for 5,000. So Jamie Lee Curtis's 25K is not included in this 81K. So let's do times 0.95. So after processing fees, they would have at least $77,110.55 plus the $25,000 from Jamie Lee Curtis. So that's not even, so we're at $102,000. That's only roughly $15,000 difference without the golf money, which we know checks were being paid directly to Open Hand Foundation. Okay. This is the 23, to be fair, but there's no reason to assume it hasn't been like this for years. So, can we really estimate how much they brought in? Sure, we have the prices. Muta did all this. So, let's just start out with Diamond. 8,000 a pop. Here's our 2 Diamond sponsors. Okay? Plus 16,000. And look at that, we're already over the amount reported as gross revenue. We didn't even hit the others yet. So Platinum Premier, I don't know what the difference is between Platinum and Platinum Premier, but we can at least assume it's 7,500 a piece. So there's 4 of them. So an extra 30,000, 7,500 times 4. Did I do that right? 7,500 times 2 is 15. That times 2, yeah, plus 30,000. Not looking good. And then titanium, let's lowball it. Let's say that was silver, or this silver was titanium. So because it's one step above the twosome player. So at minimum 3,000 a piece. There's 3 of them, so that's an extra $6,000. So without merchandise sales, ticket admissions for Indieland, we are $36,863.55 underreported. This is all information publicly available. That's why the math doesn't math. So there we go. That's the last I'm going to talk about this, unless something wild happens. That's it. I'm done. If you're still somebody that's trying to defend this guy, there's too, like, you're not critically thinking. You are incapable of thinking critically because there's too much objective evidence to at least ask real questions. Like, did you really have no idea the money was just sitting there? Really? Do you really think that your books reconcile with what is publicly available to do your own math, this rudimentary math that anyone can do? It's very simple. You know, you don't have to be an accountant to do this math. All right, so if you stuck around this long, thanks again. I hope you learned something. Comment down below if you learned something, and comment if you have any particular tax topic going forward. Like I said, this is going to be mainly an educational channel and gaming channel. Gaming news will be a rare occurrence, I hope, because I did not enjoy this entire fiasco, because like I had said before, I had been a fan of Jirard. I had been a fan of the completion pretty much since they started, since before the New Game Plus series started, and he was one game away from completing New Game Plus. And so it's upsetting that somebody that I just thought, man, it was so cool that he had this job to just make this video game content, and everybody always had such nice things to say about him. To learn that all of this is use Mutahar's a big old kerfuffle, some tomfoolery even. At least the money got donated now, but there is more in there because if they started with six, if this was just 2022, this isn't even doing like go back and watch Mutahar's other like his second video analyzing everything, and you'll see that the math didn't math for 21 or 19 as well. But he did the same type of math that I just did. I used his method, which is fine. It's publicly available data, and then it's just addition. So there's potentially a whole lot of underreporting. So the 600K that they donated, great, super duper glad it happened. There's a lot left that they owe to actual charities. I'm going to say actual charities because they are not, in my eyes. So that's it. I'm done.